Today's story will take you deep into the heart of a toxic love triangle that spiraled out of control, leading to a shocking murder. Welcome to this gripping true crime story where passion turns fatal. Meet Kat Roberts, a wealthy woman in her late 30s living the American dream with her husband, Richard. But everything changed when she met Emily James, a beautiful, younger woman who ignited a passion Kat hadn't felt in years. Kat was so smitten that she divorced her husband, taking half of his fortune to build a new life with Emily. At 39, her marriage had long grown stale. Richard was kind, but distant, more invested in his work than in her. For years, Kat played her role as the dutiful wife, attending charity galas, managing the household, and trying to convince herself that this was enough. Yet each day felt more hollow than the last. So then she met Emily. It was during a volunteer shift at a local art gallery that Emily had appeared like a bright flame in the middle of Kat's monotonous life. Emily was everything Kat was not: young, full of life, and fearless at 25 with her short, cropped hair and infectious smile. Emily made Kat. Their connection was instantaneous, magnetic even. It started with innocent conversations about art, but soon every glance lingered too long and every touch felt electric. Kat found herself drawn to Emily in ways she had never experienced before. The excitement, the thrill, it was intoxicating. And before she could even fully process it, Kat knew she was in love. The realization hit her one evening as she lay beside Richard in their massive cold bed. His soft snores filled the room while her heart raced with thoughts of Emily. Kat knew she couldn't go on living this lie. Her marriage, her life with Richard, it was over. She wanted more. She wanted Emily. A week later, after years of routine and silence, Kat told Richard she wanted a divorce. Richard had been blindsided by the divorce. He sat at their dining room table, dumbfounded, while Kat explained, without going into too much detail, that she had fallen out of love. He had always taken her for granted, assuming that their comfortable life would be enough to keep her around. But Kat's decision was firm, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over her life. The divorce was swift, and Kat walked away with half of Richard's fortune. At the time, she didn't feel a shred of guilt. After all, she had wasted years in a loveless marriage. This was her chance to start over. Kat moved into a sleek, modern condo downtown. It was far smaller than the estate she had shared with Richard, but it felt like freedom. Emily moved in with her soon after, and their lives became a whirlwind of excitement. They dined at upscale restaurants, attended art shows, and took spontaneous weekend trips. Emily was a whirlwind of energy, pulling Kat into a world she had never known, one filled with creativity, passion, and spontaneity. Kat had never been happier. She was deeply, madly in love with Emily, and the money she took from Richard was put to good use in their lavish new lifestyle. Kat spoiled Emily with designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and trips to far-off places. For the first time in years, she felt young again, alive with possibility. But as the months passed, subtle cracks began to form in their perfect world. Emily became more elusive, her texts becoming shorter, her weekends suddenly filled with plans that didn't involve Kat. At first, Kat brushed it off, telling herself that Emily was just independent and needed her space. But doubt started creeping in. Kat's doubts turned into full-blown suspicion one night when Emily came home late, far too late. Her eyes were glassy, her words slurred as she offered vague explanations about a work party. Kat had seen Emily like this before, but tonight felt different. There was a distance in her gaze, an unfamiliar coldness in her tone that sent a chill down Kat's spine. In the days that followed, Emily became increasingly distant. She spent more time away, offering up flimsy excuses for why she couldn't be home. Kat tried to push the thoughts away, but the nagging feeling that something was wrong refused to leave. Then, one Friday night, after a string of missed calls and no response from Emily, Kat decided to follow her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quietly slipped into her car and tailed Emily's old red convertible across the city. So the streets were empty as Emily drove to the edge of town, parking in front of a modest, unfamiliar house. Kat's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she watched Emily approach the front door. Her heart sank as a tall, athletic woman with dark hair stepped out to greet Emily. Kat's stomach twisted as she watched the two women embrace too intimately. The woman kissed Emily on the lips, the scene playing out like a nightmare in slow motion. Kat felt the world around her begin to collapse. Emily hadn't been working late. She hadn't been at parties. She had been seeing someone else. This woman, Sarah, was her secret. Tears welled up in Kat's eyes as she watched Emily disappear inside the house, laughing, completely unaware of the devastation she had left behind. The love Kat had fought so hard for, the marriage she had thrown away, the fortune she had spent, it had all been a lie. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in Kat's heart. For hours she sat in her car, watching the light flicker from inside Sarah's house. Emily was there laughing, comfortable, and intimate with someone else. Every second felt like a fresh stab, and by the time Kat returned home, she was barely holding herself together. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent replaying the scene over and over in her mind, Kat confronted Emily. She tried to be calm at first, waiting for Emily to wake up, her emotions a tightly wound coil beneath the surface. But as soon as Emily groggily asked where the coffee was, the coil snapped. "Where were you last night, Emily?" Kat demanded, her voice shaky with barely contained rage. Emily, still bleary-eyed and unprepared for the storm, shrugged. "I told you I was out with friends. What's your problem?" "I followed you," Kat blurted out, her voice rising. "I saw you with Sarah." Emily's face froze for a moment, and Kat saw the truth flash in her eyes before she tried to cover it up. "So you followed me?" Emily said, her voice turning defensive. "What the hell, Kat? That's crazy. You're acting like a jealous wife or something." "I was your wife," Kat shot back, her words laced with bitterness. "I gave up everything for you, Emily. I left my husband, my life, my entire world for us. And now you're cheating on me with her?" Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping as she sat down on the couch, avoiding Kat's eyes. "Sarah's been in my life for a long time," she admitted quietly, "before you and I even met." "So what? You've been stringing me along this whole time." Kat's voice cracked with hurt. "So why didn't you tell me?" Emily didn't respond right away, but when she finally spoke, her words were cold and calculated. "I didn't think you'd take it well. You were so intense. And I like being with you, Kat. I love the excitement, the newness. But Sarah's always been my person." Kat's heart shattered. "So I was just a distraction? A fling?" Emily looked up at her, expression unfeeling. "I didn't plan on it going this far." For a moment, Kat couldn't breathe. The woman she had given everything for had never intended to stay. That had all been a lie, and now all Kat had left were the broken pieces of a life she had destroyed for someone who never really loved her. Kat's world unraveled. In the days following Emily's confession, she walked around the condo in a daze, unable to focus her child's chaotic soul of anger, regret, and heartbreak. The place that had once felt like her fresh start now felt like a suffocating cage filled with memories she wished she could erase. Emily moved out soon after the confrontation, telling Kat she needed space and that it would be better for both of them. So the words felt like a slap, but Kat didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Emily was going to live with Sarah, and there was nothing Kat could do to stop it. As she packed up Emily's things, Kat felt her anger rising again. The expensive dresses she had bought Emily, the jewelry, the trips, they had all been part of the illusion. And she had poured money and love into their relationship, hoping to build something real, but it had been a house of cards. The realization that she had sacrificed her marriage for someone who had never been fully committed was unbearable. And to make matters worse, the money Kat had received in the divorce, her half of Richard's fortune, was dwindling fast. Between the lavish trip gifts and their extravagant lifestyle, the wealth she thought would last her years was nearly gone. Kat felt like she had lost everything. The security she once had with Richard, the future she had envisioned with Emily, it was all gone, leaving only emptiness and regret in its place. The following weeks were filled with darkness. Kat tried to distract herself, throwing herself into old hobbies, reading and going out with friends, but nothing could fill the void that Emily had left behind. She would lie awake at night, thinking of the life she had thrown away for a woman who had never truly cared about her. Emily's betrayal gnawed at her like an open wound, and it seemed like every day she discovered something new that added salt to the pain. On one particularly bitter afternoon, Kat learned through mutual friends that Emily and Sarah were planning a weekend getaway at the same beach resort Kat had taken Emily to only months before. That was the last straw. The anger that had simmered beneath the surface for weeks finally boiled over. Kat couldn't accept it anymore. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that Emily was moving on as though nothing had happened. Kat's mind raced, fueled by a toxic mix of jealousy, rage, and heartbreak. One night, drunk and desperate, Kat decided she couldn't let Emily just walk away. She had given up everything for her marriage, her money, her future, and Emily had thrown it all away for someone else. Kat's mind became consumed with thought Emily needed to understand the pain she had caused. And if she couldn't make her feel it emotionally, maybe she could make her feel it another way. As the anger continued to fester, Kat's thoughts darkened. She couldn't let Emily and Sarah be happy, not after everything they had done. Emily had betrayed her in the worst way possible, and there was no justice in simply walking away. Kat began to plan, her mind racing with ideas, each more dangerous than the last. She spent hours on social media tracking Emily's every move. She knew Sarah's routine, her house, her job where she and Emily went together. Kat collected the information meticulously, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her plan wasn't immediate. She didn't want to do anything in the heat of the moment. So this needed to be precise, a way to make sure Emily understood the gravity of what she had done. Kat began to stockpile items, tools she might need. She even practiced a few scenarios in her head, going over what she would say, how she would confront Emily and Sarah when the time came. It was the only thing that gave her peace, the idea of taking back control, of making Emily pay. As the date of Emily and Sarah's weekend getaway approached, Kat's plan solidified. She would follow them there, confront them, and make sure that Emily felt the full weight of her betrayal. The confrontation would not end well for anyone, but Kat no longer cared. If she couldn't have the life she wanted, then neither could Emily. She was ready to do whatever it took to make sure of that. The crisp air of the Texas coast cut through the night as Kat pulled up to the beachside resort where Emily and Sarah were staying. The resort was quiet, its sprawling grounds lit only by soft lamps along the pathways. Kat sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding as she watched the two women laughing and walking hand in hand from the beach toward their private villa. Her stomach churned with jealousy and rage. Every step they took together felt like another knife in her back. For hours, she had watched them from a distance, waiting for the right moment, and now it had arrived. She grabbed the small knife she had hidden in her purse, a last-minute addition to her plan. But her hand shook as she opened the car door, feeling the weight of what she was about to do press down on her, but the burning need for revenge pushed her forward. Kat followed them, keeping her distance until they reached the villa. She watched as they entered, the door shutting softly behind them. It was now or never. Her footsteps were light but deliberate as she approached the door. She could hear the muffled sound of their laughter through the walls, and it only fueled her anger. Without hesitating, she knocked sharply on the door, her pulse racing. Emily answered, her face lighting up with surprise, then quickly shifting to confusion and alarm. "Kat, what are you doing here?" Kat pushed her way inside, her eyes wild and filled with fury. "You ruined my life, Emily," she spat, the knife hidden in her coat pocket. "I gave you everything and you threw it all away for her?" Emily stepped back, her face paling. "Kat, you need to leave. This isn't." So before she could finish, Sarah appeared from the hallway, her expression hardening when she saw Kat. "So what the hell is going on here?" Kat's anger bubbled over. "You," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at Sarah. "You took her from me. You ruined everything." Sarah moved to stand in front of Emily, her posture protective. "You need to leave, Kat. Now." "No," Kat snapped, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm not leaving. Not until you both understand what you've done to me." Emily's face softened slightly, but there was still fear in her eyes. "Kat, this isn't the way. We can talk about this, but you have to leave." The words fell on deaf ears. Kat's grip tightened on the knife, her heart pounding in her chest. In a blur of motion, she pulled it from her pocket and pointed it toward the two women. Emily gasped, and Sarah immediately stepped forward, blocking Emily from harm. "Kat, put the knife down," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the tension. But Kat couldn't hear her. All she saw was red years of frustration, heartbreak, and betrayal crashing over her like a wave. The life she had once dreamed of with Emily was gone, destroyed by these two women standing in front of her. And in that moment, Kat snapped. With a scream, she lunged towards Sarah, the knife glinting under the soft villa light. Sarah grabbed her arm, struggling to hold her back as they stumbled into the living room, knocking over furniture. Emily screamed, backing away in terror as the two women fought. In the chaos, the knife slipped from Kat's grip, clattering to the floor. Sarah pushed Kat back, her face filled with fury. "You're insane," she shouted, her voice shaking. Kat, panting and disheveled, fell to her knees, her body trembling as the weight of everything crashed down on her. The reality of what she had done, what she had nearly done, began to sink in. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at Emily, who stood frozen, wide-eyed and terrified. "I loved you," Kat whispered, her voice broken. "I gave up everything for you." Emily, her face pale, stepped forward cautiously. "I never wanted this, Kat," she said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you." But the words felt empty now. Kat had already lost everything, and there was no undoing the damage that had been done. For a brief moment, the room was still. Emily standing in shock, Sarah watching Kat warily, and Kat on her knees, broken and defeated. Then, in a sudden, desperate motion, Kat reached for the knife again. This time, she didn't hesitate. Before anyone could stop her, Kat drove the knife into Sarah's side with a scream of pure anguish. Sarah cried out in pain, collapsing to the floor as blood began to pool beneath her. Emily's horrified scream echoed through the villa as she rushed to Sarah's side, trying to stop the bleeding. Kat stood above them, her body shaking, the knife falling from her blood-stained hands. When she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, the reality of what she had just done hit her like a freight train. Emily cradled Sarah's head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, she sobbed, desperately trying to stop the bleeding, but it was clear that Sarah's wounds were too deep. "Why?" Emily screamed, looking up at Kat, her voice filled with devastation. "Why did you do this?" But Kat couldn't answer. All she could do was stare at the scene before her, Emily crying over Sarah's lifeless body, the woman she had once loved so deeply, now cradling the woman she had killed. Sirens wailed in the distance, but Kat barely heard them. The police arrived not long after, drawn by a neighbor's call reporting the screams. Kat didn't resist when they arrested her. She was too numb, too broken to care anymore. As the officers led her away in handcuffs, she caught one last glimpse of Emily, her face streaked with tears, holding Sarah's lifeless body. There was a scene that would be seared into Kat's mind for the rest of her life. In the days following the murder, Kat was in a daze. The media swarmed the case, dubbing her a Jace lover turned killer. The story of a wealthy woman leaving her husband for a younger lover only to end up committing murder captivated the public. It was a sensational story, and Kat became infamous overnight. She barely spoke during her trial, her once vibrant spirit completely drained. The details of her affair with Emily and the toxic love triangle with Sarah were laid bare for the world to see. The Kat was painted as an obsessive old woman who couldn't handle rejection. There was no denying that was exactly what she had become. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering their verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. Kat was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no chance of parole for at least 15. As she sat in her cell, staring blankly at the concrete wall, she thought back to how it had all begun, how she had left Richard, taken half his fortune, and fallen in love with Emily, believing that she had finally found happiness. But now all that was left was emptiness. Emily was gone, Sarah was dead, and Kat had destroyed everything in her life worth saving. Her actions had led her down a path of destruction, and there was no going back. Every day in prison felt like a lifetime. The love that had once consumed her now felt like a distant, twisted memory. And as the years passed, Kat finally came to terms with the bitter truth. She had lost everything, and it was all her fault.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more shocking story to come.